I will have made several assumptions in coming and preparing the presentation tonight. One assumption is that I'll be talking to leaders, which I've seen is the case here. And secondly, I've assumed that you are learning more theology with the other presenters. So I've not put in much like verses in my presentation. I've not at all approached it in that way. So we'll look at developing management skills from a purely management perspective. And as I start, I should also mention that I'm very thankful. Normally I'm sponsored by another organization to give these talks, the LBC Lifeline Resources, which is in Oldham, and they're also in Trafford. So I'm thankful for them for availing me to give you this presentation. I'll now just share the presentation that I have. Yes.
All right.
Could be okay now. All right, so today the presentation, like I said, is on developing skills in organization, and that's management skills. All right, so what are we going to look at? We're going to examine, first of all, the key meaning of words that we have used in particularly the topic itself. We are going to also evaluate the objectives that are pertinent to different organizations. We are going to analyze the development of management studies so that we understand where the skills are coming from, and also look at what are skills in management and what are functions in management. What is the difference between the two? And which will take us also to examining the different management styles. And you'd see one thing throughout my presentation, I may use the words leadership and management interchangeably. At one point, I've got a slide where I'm giving out the differences between the two. So don't worry if I use the two words interchangeably. Okay, as we start, consider, I would believe you have come across the word organization. Do you know what the meaning of the word organization is? And why do we think organization exists? And also we may say, what do you think is common in organization? In other words, how do they also differ? And also think about the different types of organizations and why we have those different types. I will not require you to answer these questions. I'll just head on. Now, my interpretation of organization is that an organization is a social arrangement which pursues collective goals and controls its own performance, which has a boundary separate from its environment. What this means is, first of all, social arrangement. It means that organizations are made of people. Now, collective goals, it means every organization is there to achieve an objective or a certain purpose. But also, organizations are unique in that usually they would monitor their performance. And one other distinctive factor about organization is that it will have boundaries. So, in other words, no two organizations will be exactly similar. There will be a distinctive separation, one from the other. And one other word that we need to also know is the word management. What is management? Who is a manager? So in simple terms, because I've got 1 hour, management is getting things done through other people. That's a simple definition without belaboring it. And this was given by Losme Stewart. Management is getting things done by other people. But in other books, you'll see that they more emphasize on managers as people who control resources in the organization. And in the organization, when we talk about resources, we usually talk about what we call the 4 M's. And the 4 M's, we are talking about machines, manpower, material, and I usually ask people about the 4th one. And like, in the interest of time, I'll give out that one, money. Okay, so material, machines, okay, manpower, and money. Those are the resources that managers set to control in organizations. And one other thing that I didn't mention, I asked the question about the different types of organization. Just in a nutshell, I'll just mention, because I know we are talking about a church here, and most churches are what we call charitable organizations. And these can be differentiated from what are called private organizations. The main difference between the two is usually in their objective. Okay? So, church is there to save, while a private organization, their main objective may be there to make a profit or to make some money, as it were. Now, I did say that I've got a slide that spells out the differences between leadership and management. It's important to know this because management, by its nature, is an appointed position, while leadership can be found in an organization at any level. So if you go through the characteristics of leadership and management, you see where I'm coming from and what I mean. So in a normal organization, you can have someone who is lower down the ranks of the organization, but is in a leadership position. It's much possible. While if they have not been given that position, you wouldn't say they're a manager. So manager normally would be an appointed position. So some of the characteristics of leadership is normally they will be doing the right things. I have patiently been listening about the topic that you studied, ethics. And one of the things is that leaders are normally supposed to be more ethical in their conduct. And leaders have followers, while managers have subordinates. And sometimes leadership can be found in a very informal setting, and the leader would have more interpersonal aspects. We'll see when we'll be talking about skills, what interpersonal skills are or aspects are. And leadership is also most often to do with change, and it's attained when one has respect of other people. So a leader will be much respected by other people, while normally manager, because they are in that position, they may gain their respect from being in an authority position. Okay. So managers ensure goals are achieved, and they would aim to maintain equilibrium in the organization, sometimes at the expense of interpersonal relationships. Okay. Now, again, to understand where we are going in defining what management skills are, we need to go back a little bit and see where the study of management started. In olden days, it was believed that leaders and managers are born. So if you were tall, if you were or had some features, people would assign these words on you to say, oh, he should be a leader because he's tall, he's got a deep voice, or he's got some other features. So in the 1800s, there were some guys who said, no, leadership can actually be attained through study. And one of the guys is a guy called Henry Fayot, who is French. And another one, Frederick Taylor from the USA. Taylor was an engineer. They are the ones that actually initiated the study of management. And Henry Fayot is more known for his contribution in terms of saying that people in organization have to be treated like you would treat machines. Okay? So they should be taken as you would treat machines in organization. Frederick Taylor is known for bringing some management principles. Let me just read some of the principles that he brought. Yes, Taylor brought principles like what is called the unit of direction, meaning that in an organization, everyone must move in the same direction. Okay. On the other hand, Henry Fayot brought in what was called division of work, meaning that people have to do specific jobs in an organization. Okay. And if we go again to Taylor, is one of the guys that started what is called motion studies, where what workers are doing is measured in terms of time and the number of steps that they are taking. And again, this contributed to division of work. It also contributed to efficiency in work organization. However, this, what is called the scientific management or classical era of management, which is at the very start of management studies, was more prominent in looking at human beings and not human beings. So therefore, a lot of people, although it has contributed to some of the things that we do now, do say that in this era, human beings were mostly mistreated. Although, again, it's a time when people started being paid wages and the like. One of the things that is hated again that era is that there was separation between management and labor workers. And Frederick Taylor, for example, stated that there must be a difference between someone who is working on the floor, meaning that they are in the production, and someone who is in an authoritative position, in that thinking in organization should only be left to someone who is in a position of authority. And as you would see, that's not the case in our maybe modern era. We are supposed to think at every level. Now, because of some of these problems, they emerged guys like Ayrton Mayo, who brought in different approach, which will be the next step in management studies, called the human relations era. In the human relationship era, Elton Mayo had actually intended to again measure how people do their work in terms of time motions and also effects of their environment. So some people in America were separated into two groups in an experiment that was pioneered by Elton Mayo. One group was put in a room that had light, and another one was put in a dark room, and they just wanted to see how they'll perform their jobs. However, what turned out to be the results of that experiment was very surprising to the researchers. They found that it wasn't the light that actually made one group to be productive over the other. It was their relationship, or the relationship between individuals in the group. So that brought in another set or a different perspective in terms of management studies, a different thinking on how people should be treated in organizations. And they started the thinking that perhaps managers should look at their relationships with their workers in trying to make the organization more productive. And moving on from there, there came other guys who went deep into studying the behavior of people at the workplace. And one of them is Abraham Maslow, in what is now or was called the behavior era or approach era. And Abraham Maslow particularly looked at why people would be influenced to do work in an organization. Again, just like Elton Mayo, his primary intention was not to study how people work in organization. It just so happened that what he discovered was construed to be something that can be used in organization. Abraham Maslow was a healthy worker, so the theory that he brought in was initially intended to see how mentally ill people can be made to be healthy again. So he brought in, as a result, what is called the hierarchy of needs, which is now mostly used in motivation of workers. But this period is mostly known in summary for the statement that came out from there, that human beings are not as simple as machines like the other approaches indicated, like, for example, the scientific management approach said human beings are more complex. So in order to influence them to work and be productive, you have to study them. And also you have to know that one individual is different from another, so you can't treat them all the same. So guys like Friedrich Herzberg, they brought in their own theorem. Herzberg brought in a theory which is called the two-factor theory, meaning people are motivated by different things. Some things in organization have just to be present, but they are not motivators, which are called the hygiene factors. But some things which satisfy people can motivate people. Then you have the guy called McGregor, Douglas McGregor, brought in another theory to say, generally, people in an organization can be divided into two. There are some people who are called theory X people, who normally dislike work, and they have to be coerced to do work. And he termed the other group as theory Y people, who are people who generally like their work, and they will take their work as they would do when they are playing. And these people, you don't need to use maximum effort to make them work. Moving on from there, there are other guys who said no, they feel management studies can be developed further, and you have the contingency or situational approach, which stated that no, all those approaches missed out something. You have to manage people according to the situation, taking into account different things, including the environment in which they are working. And moving on from there, you have the systems approach. Again, systems approach takes its emphasis on studying the environment before you devise a style on how you can manage your subordinate, or if you are a leader, how you can manage your followers. So this is, in a nutshell, I've taken time on that one, on how management studies developed from the perspective of looking at a person and their physical attributes and saying whether they qualify as a leader or as a manager, and whether they don't. These studies brought in an important aspect in that it was realized that skills in management can be learned. It's not like you are born a leader. No, you can make yourself a leader or a manager. Okay. Now, in terms of looking at the skills are acquired attributes, like just I was saying, you can acquire the attributes, and these are the enablers of managers or leaders to perform their functions. Functions are the things that needs to be done in that role of whether it's a manager. Particularly, let's talk about a manager in management. So I'll start with the functions. Okay, so functions developed from early studies of the era that we just looked at when we were looking at the development of management. It came from the classical or scientific management era, and it proposed 5 functions, although later writers added in 2, which is motivation and communicating. But let's look at the 5 that were the first ones to be given as the functions of managers. So the first one was that managers should plan. Yeah. So planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. Yeah. So planning is just making sure you have things in advance on what you want to achieve. Organizing particularly talks about organizing the resources, including people in the organization, so that they are put in places suitable for them or in which they will maximize their potential. Commanding is to do with giving instructions. Coordinating is making sure there is harmony, there is connection between one form of or department from the other, just to make it simple so that you understand. While controlling is going back to maybe your plans that you have made and making sure that those plans have been achieved. Controlling, I'll be looking at control when I'll tackle decision making. Is it on Wednesday? Yes, on Wednesday. So I'll more dwell on control, but it's to do with looking at your plans, whether they have been achieved, so you apply some control. So that's control. So managers have these 5 as their functions, and like I said, there were 2 that later writers added: motivating and communicating. And these 5 were proposed by Henry Fayol, who is seen as the guru in management, particularly in the classical era. Okay. In terms of skills, we'll go to a guy called Mitzbeck, who gave out what would be called management roles. And in the roles is where we'll pick up the skills that are required for managers, or particularly, or maybe, let's say, leaders as well. So there are basically three categories of skills that would be required by managers or leaders. Is the first one, interpersonal; second one, information processing; and the third one would be decision-making skills. Okay. So in interpersonal, usually it's because managers will be required to be figureheads, representing their organization. Maybe it could be in other, or going to other organization, or performing ceremonial duties. They will need to be leaders, managers' relationship with subordinates, especially allocating tasks, hiring, training, and motivating staff. So that falls under interpersonal skills. Liaison, that's also the function of, or the role of going on and coordinating with other organizations in networks. Informational laws, managers need to be able to monitor information. Okay? So they should be able to collect and sort out information which is used to build a general understanding of the organization. They should be able to know which information is important for which department, for which individuals in the organization, and that's the disseminating role there. They should be able to be spokesperson for their organization, speaking on behalf of the organization. Okay. Decisional skills. Managers should have entrepreneurship skills, meaning they should be able to identify opportunities, should be able to be disturbance handlers, be able to sort conflict. Yeah? Should be able to sort conflict, should be able to allocate resources appropriately for the efficient working of the organization. And most importantly, they should have negotiating skills, must be able to negotiate. Okay? So in a nutshell, the three categories represent the skills that you need to develop as managers or as leaders: the interpersonal skills, informational processing skills, and decision-making skills. And like I mentioned, I'll be taking you through decision-making on Wednesday, so we'll dwell on that much on Wednesday. I thought I was going to take 2 hours, so I had tea break there. Yeah, so but we'll just continue. Yeah, you say? Oh, yeah. Okay.
I like the
next time we'll have tea break. Okay, so in terms of developing the management skills, you also need to appreciate that there will be different styles of leadership that you need to adopt as a manager, or you need to be aware of, not particularly adopt, but you need to be aware of, and it's up to you to choose which one suits you and suits the organization that you are looking after. In general, Most styles would be task-focused or wholly task-focused, and others would be people-focused. Okay. The guy Hune Yeager identified 4 different types of leaders or leadership styles. He identified some leaders as being dictators. Okay. So, dictatorial style, autocratic style, democratic style, laissez-faire style. I asked the question that I wanted to ask about dictatorship and democratic styles of leadership later on when we'll be looking at one of the styles. So I'll just proceed. Okay. Dictatorial particularly refers to managers or leaders who make decisions without consulting anyone. Okay. So they will just make the decision on their own without an input of anyone. Autocratic style will be managers who make decisions. They would appear like they consult people. Most often it will just be a question, but they will go back and make the decision anyway themselves. So autocratic, that's a slight difference with the dictatorial style of leadership. Democratic is where you make decisions, or managers with this style would make decisions by involving others in the organization, their subordinates or their followers. Laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is sort of a more relaxed style of leadership where you let things drive themselves. And you would feel like, okay, it's an attitude like I don't care whatever comes out. So you let everyone in the organization do whatever they want to do, and as a leader you don't make any decisions. Okay. And from there we could look at the 5. I still have time, so it's okay. The 5 types of leadership styles, and I think you will relate them to the skills that we have just looked at, and see where you can place yourself in terms of how you want to be, your style to be like. Now, continuum leadership style was propounded by 2 guys called Telbaum and Schmitz in 2009. And this is where normally I ask people the style they may prefer, whether they would prefer dictatorship or democratic. Most often the answer that I get is people say, no, I would like the democratic type of leadership. And quite often I do say, no, that's not the correct answer. Because both are ideal. Most often it depends on situations, as we'll see later on. It depends on the situation. So, like in a factory, for example, where you are looking after production workers, a democratic type or style of leadership may not work. So you have to be somewhat, or you have to adopt the dictatorial style of leadership in that environment. In the army, you'd see that the army by its nature, their leaders are more dictatorial, but it's just the nature of the organization.
Yeah.
So there is no right answer between being democratic or being dictatorial. It's the situation that will spell out that. Okay. So these guys said managers can be maybe on the extreme of autocratic, which is a boss-centered leadership, or they could be in what is called the free lane, which is a subordinate-centered leadership. In between, you have other stages of leadership styles. So again, like I said, it depends on the situation. There are so many factors that you need to take into account in order for you to say, okay, I want to be particularly on this place, on this position in the continuum. Okay. Ashridge Management College did a study, and what they found is that the styles could be categorized into 4. So they came up with what is called the tells, sells, consults, and joins. Tells would be a style where you have an autocratic dictator who makes all decisions. Sells, you have the persuader, still makes all the decision, but believes the subordinate need to be motivated, so he may ask them 1 or 2 questions, but it's just to make them feel they are involved somehow, and he'll go back and make the decision himself. Consults is a partial involvement, confers with subordinate and takes in their views into account, but the leader or the manager will still have the final say. So that's a concern. Joins, this is very democratic. Leader and follower make the decision, and most often on the joins, you may have a vote at the end of it and see what the majority say, and then you take in that decision. Okay. In terms of the conclusion of this study, it was concluded that most subordinates, they prefer the consult style rather than the joins, which is more democratic. They prefer that the manager takes some control, and that the control is not seen as residing in them as subordinates. Okay, so people led by consult managers have the most favorable attitude towards their work. Most subordinates feel they are being led by tells or sales managers. So when they asked around organization, most of them, whether it's true or not, would say, no, we are being led by a tells or a sales style of manager. In practice, what was seen as more important is that a manager should be consistent. Whether they are a tells style manager, they should stick to that. Or they are a sales or they are consult, there must be consistency. So it appears subordinate appreciated it where the manager was more consistent with their style of management. Like I said, what was more preferred was the consult style. Leslie Clickett, again, studied the various management styles, and they came up with 4 categories, what they called systems. So system 1 is the exploitative authoritarian manager, and that one, the leader has no confidence or trust in subordinates, imposes decision, never delegates, motivates by threats, okay, has little communication with his subordinates, and does not encourage teamwork on the exploitative authoritarian. The second one, benevolent authoritarian, the leader has only superficial trust in subordinate, imposes decision, never delegates, motivates by reward, and through sometimes other tasks in problem solving. And basically, manager with this style of management would be more paternalistic, okay, taking his subordinate as his own children or treating them as his own children. The third category or style, which is the participative style of leadership or management, in that one the leader has some confidence in his subordinates, but he controls most of the decisions, motivates by rewards and the level of involvement, okay, but is also quick to take in suggestions by subordinates and sees the ideas coming from subordinates as constructive. The last one, democratic, the leader has complete confidence in subordinates, and some subordinates are allowed to make some of the decisions. Motivation is by reward. Subordinates are encouraged to participate, and there is a substantial amount of idea sharing in that style of leadership, according to Lensis Lickett. So you'd see that these are like researchers, and each one came with their own categories of what they thought would be management styles or leadership styles. Okay. Let me go to the next one. Blake and Newton's Managerial Grid. And this one, you can relate it to maybe one or two of the other styles that we have looked at. And but these two guys, Blake and Newton, said the style of a manager or a leader will depend on what their concern is. Whether their concern is concern for the work or concern for the people. And in developing such type of thinking, they came up with this managerial grid, and they said managers could potentially be placed at what we call a quadrant on the grid. So you have, for example, one, so that would be a manager or a leader who is low in concern for people and low in concern for results of the task. So that's a 1-1. You may have a 1-9 manager, so he's highly concerned with people, but low concern with the task or results in the organization. Ideally, you can have 9-9, where a manager has both concern for people and concern for the work or results of the work. You could also have what is called middle of the road manager. That's 5-5, where there is a balance. Ideally, the grid, or these two guys, suggested that the ideal position is 9-9, because that entails a manager who is a team worker, okay, who has got both concerns to the maximum: concern for people and concern for results in the task. One who is only concerned with people, you would see in this one is termed a country club manager. Okay, that means they are just happy for people to be happy, but they don't care about the tasks being done. Okay. The two guys initiated some arguments, okay, and some people were saying no, but there are some things that needs to be considered in order to place people at a position in the grid. So things like the type of subordinates that they are looking after, the task itself, or the personality of the leader. It could be someone who likes jokes, or people may think is more concerned with people and not the task. So these are some of the arguments that came out from this categorization of the management styles. Okay. So that's it on the management styles. Like I said, there is no, we can't say there is a right or wrong style of leadership. There are so many things that you need to take into consideration, but it's worth knowing the different styles of leadership that are there, and it will make you adopt an appropriate style that you think would suit the environment or the type of organization that you are leading. Okay, new perspective to leadership. I believe you have heard of what are called transformational leaders and transactional leaders. Again, it's worthy noting when we are learning this topic on development skills. Transformational leaders treats their relationship with subordinates by inspiring them. On the other hand, transactional leaders treat relationship with followers in terms of exchange. Okay, whatever they do for me, then I can do for them, sort of way. Now, I will not dwell on this because we are not looking at leadership per se, which is another topic maybe in future we can look at, and we can also, together with this, we may need to explore maybe the meaning of what is power, what is authority, and things like that. Okay, so like I said, added to the function, the 5 functions of management, which were planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and the last one, controlling. It was motivating and communicating. Now, motivation, which is again a wider subject on its own, has also to deal with skills development. So it's worth exploring what motivation is. And motivation is a decision-making process through which individuals choose desired outcomes and sets in motion behavior to acquire them. In other words, when you are a manager, you should be able to, maybe let's use a simple word, inspire your subordinate, or as a leader, inspire your followers to do things, or they should desire to do things, and not just doing them, but doing them happily. So that's what motivation is all about. Abraham Maslow came up with one of the theorems of motivation, which is called the hierarchy of needs. And basically what he said is that people would have different needs that will motivate them depending on at which stage they are in life. And generally, we have what are called the lower needs, which are more basic things. So if you have those ones, it means maybe you are ready now to go on to the next set of needs, which are called security needs. And after security needs, you have love needs, you have self-fulfillment needs, and then you have self-actualization. What it means as a leader in developing skills and in also noting down what you need to do in motivation is that you have to use tools from such theorems as like the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs to know what will motivate your subordinate or followers. So if they have got the basic needs, it means maybe to motivate them, you need to dangle around, as it were, like dangling a carrot to a horse, the next set of needs. Or you need to promise them the next set of needs so that you motivate them. And central to motivation is also whether money is a motivator. Okay, giving people money, is it motivating? And there are different arguments on that. Though there is a degree to which money can motivate people up to a certain extent, but beyond that, sometimes money becomes a demotivator. Job satisfaction, you need to also be aware of which attributes will satisfy people on their jobs. Okay. Now, when we are looking at skills development, we have used HESPEC laws of managers, and we have looked at them in order that you develop skills like being able to instruct your subordinate, being able to build team, being able to communicate. Okay. You should be able to search for information that is relevant. So I'm more concentrating on the last, which is saying supervisory competencies. Those are the skills that you need to acquire as leaders or managers. Okay. Behave ethically is there. You should be able to manage yourself. So those are some of the skills. How do we acquire the skills? How do we develop the skills? I'm now winding up. First of all, is through practice. You can acquire them by studying formally or informally, reading books. There's so many books, and observation, role models, observing what they are doing. And lastly, maybe making mistakes, which relates to the first one, practice. And as you make mistakes when you're practicing, you are learning in the process. So that's how you can develop these skills that we have looked at. That marks the end of the presentation on developing management skills from an organization's perspective. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hand over to Prophetess. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much. Apostle Brian, can you help me to stop the recording? Wow, thank you very much,